What I can say without going too into it is that this year has been full of the highest highs and the lowest lows of my life. And I see so many women around afraid to speak, especially right now, afraid to share their experiences. And fear is by design, it's silent. But I also acknowledge that many people don't have the opportunity to speak. So I do feel fortunate. And it's the women who have had the ability to use their voice that's kept me strong and you know, helped me in my belief and my fight for the world to be safer for women and girls.
As Justin can claim, we gave her everything. What else can we still do? Yeah. So it's odd. But so final question, because they asked, could you go to jail? And you're like, it's unlikely. Is it more likely that Stephanie Jones could go to jail? And if Blake was more involved and actually pushed that stuff to happen, could there be any sort of criminal?
Blake Lively has officially entered her courtroom villain era. What started as a carefully curated plea for justice has now veered wildly off course into a finger-pointing circus of deflection and denial. In her own words, it's been a year of extremes, the highest highs and the lowest lows. But what's grabbing headlines isn't her vulnerability, it's her pivot. A pivot from claiming she was the victim of a smear campaign to now arguing she's been strategically deprived of evidence. The new narrative that everyone's hiding something from her, deleting, denying, or conveniently losing what she needs to prove her case.
I am also just like everybody else in the sense that I take on more than I can chew. I overcommit. I say yes to things out of fear. I people please.
Nothing against, like, I love a good hysterical female song, but not like hysterical in like a charged, great, you know, empowered way. It's just like, you know what I mean? You know that sound
it's
that's
not
like
cheesy.
A little,
it's not cheesy.
And anyways, you know, women are people of multitudes, and you know, I think that it was important to me that it didn't just feel like someone's interpretation of like male gaze. Like it really was, you know, this is what we like, this is what we listen to, this is what makes us feel these vibes.
The problem? Judges are starting to catch on. With multiple subpoenas quashed and legal motions falling flat, it's looking less like a search for truth and more like a desperate attempt to stay in control. And at the center of this chaos, content creators, media critics, and one very vocal gossip blogger who's refusing to back down. This isn't just about Blake Lively anymore. It's about how the modern celebrity tries to silence the internet when the narrative slips out of their hands. And trust me, the story only gets messier from here. If Blake Lively thought she could shut down Perez Hilton with a few legal threats and some courtroom pressure, she clearly underestimated him. In her latest court filings, Blake accuses Perez of being more than just a loudmouthed blogger. She paints him as a digital puppet of Wayfair, allegedly planting damaging stories about her on their behalf. According to her, Perez isn't just reporting, he's orchestrating. But the documents read more like a conspiracy thriller than a solid case. Her team claims he's secretly working under a contract, spinning narratives and seeding stories, yet they offer no hard proof. What they do offer is a long list of dramatic YouTube titles like Blake Lively the Bully and Don't Believe the Blake Lively Lies.
Now, Lyman hasn't been very Team Justin, it seems. He's been giving Blake a lot of, you know, where the deposition's going to happen. All this stuff keeps falling in. Are you noticing that? Even now as content creators, there's one, it just doesn't seem like he's being very friendly to anybody other than accommodating Blake. Are you seeing that too, or do you?
And here's the kicker. She's demanding the court treat these headlines like acts of harassment. But Perez isn't backing down. He's denying any partnership with Wayfair and framing this as what it really looks like, a celebrity meltdown over bad press. The court battle has officially gone off script, and what was once about justice now looks like a messy, high-profile feud between a Hollywood A-lister and the very internet voices she can't control. Blake Lively might have mastered the art of red carpet poise, but she's completely unraveling when it comes to controlling public perception. Her legal team isn't just focused on facts. They're now dissecting Perez Hilton's video titles, social media posts, and even his nicknames. Blackface Blake, Litigious Lively, Lying Lively, all of it has triggered a courtroom meltdown. But here's the twist. Some of these names are parodies rooted in Blake's own admissions. Still, her legal filings argue that Perez's sarcasm is somehow part of a grand defamatory scheme. It's almost comedic.
It could have never snowballed into what it did without organic, genuine people reacting to Blake's real statements, her real actions. So this idea that they orchestrated it, the idea that Jed Wallace or Melissa Nathan or any of them forced me to do what I'm doing, or countless others over the summer to report on her ridiculous marketing choices, her bad attitude and junkets, her avoidance of DV, where it's like, girl, this is what the movie's about. I understand maybe you're trying to make it seem a little bit more Barbie for the sake of making it successful, but you got to know the tone and you got to know your time and place, and she just didn't throughout that whole marketing campaign. And beyond that, she was marketing her own companies. How does that help the film? It only helps her. So all of that was tone deaf. It was wrong.
I think I'm like her in the sense that we don't indulge in the gossip. We don't listen to what people say about us. You just have to turn a blind eye to it. People are gonna talk, and you can't be hurt by that. You can't listen to that. And she's really striving. These days, I live my whole life. It's easier to fall into that, like talking about someone else and when you stick up for someone, you're going out on a limb when a whole group is making fun of someone. But I've really tried to have some honor in my life.
Perez, who built his brand on over-the-top celebrity commentary, is being treated like a covert operative. But the more she tries to villainize him, the more it looks like she's grasping at straws to avoid accountability. While Perez leans into his old-school tabloid flair, complete with zingers and viral headlines, Blake is playing defense with lawsuits instead of statements. It's not about setting the record straight anymore. It's about silencing the loudest voices in the room. The Hollywood PR machine is sputtering, and the harder Blake tries to control the message, the more the internet calls her bluff. Blake Lively's courtroom strategy is backfiring, and it's not subtle. Instead of building a compelling case, she's launching subpoenas like darts at anyone remotely connected to the narrative she's trying to kill. But the judges, they're not impressed. Multiple subpoenas have already been tossed out for being overreaching, intrusive, or flat-out baseless. From targeting phone companies to demanding documents from Perez Hilton and even dragging unrelated content creators into the mess, Blake's legal campaign is starting to look more like a fishing expedition than a fight for justice. What's worse, she's not even following basic court protocol. In one instance, she tried to enforce a subpoena in New York, even though it was originally filed in Nevada. The court didn't miss that. And while she scrambles to reframe the story, now claiming she's being deprived of discovery, the actual court record paints a different picture, one of chaos, withdrawn demands, and strategic retreats. The more she loses in court, the more aggressive the rhetoric becomes. This isn't about facts anymore, it's about controlling the fallout of a narrative slipping through her fingers, and the internet isn't buying it.
They were the ones who sort of were accused of doing the dirty deeds of the retaliation campaign, the untraceable acts across Reddit and so on. He denies this. He says none of that happened. We'll go through what he says. But Blake was accusing him of being hired by Tag PR, etc., to do
as we all grapple to understand it, when you're a kid, it's very hard to understand. It's something I teach my own kids, which is that, like, when somebody's lashing out, generally speaking, that person has been hurt as well. And it helps my kids at least make some sense of it. It's not the kind of, that's not the kind of nugget that was shared with me when I was a kid. I wish it was, but at least at this stage of the game, I can help my own kids with some of that, so.
Blake Lively's legal crusade isn't just costing her reputation, it's costing others real money. One independent journalist revealed that they racked up nearly $10,000 in legal fees in just 2 weeks. All because Blake's team dragged them into the courtroom drama with a subpoena that never should have been filed. The accusations? Vague. The evidence? Non-existent. They couldn't even point to a single post, video, or statement that tied this journalist to anything actionable. But that didn't stop Blake's legal team from making wild claims that the journalist was secretly being paid by her opposition, that anonymous sources were feeding her stories, even that she was part of a smear campaign without any concrete proof. When pressed for specifics, Blake's team had nothing. No dates, no quotes, no links, just a fog of insinuation and a hefty legal bill left behind. Eventually they backed off, withdrawing the subpoena, but only after weeks of costly back and forth. And now Blake's team is trying to erase the damage by calling these kinds of legal maneuvers standard procedure. But from the outside, it looks more like an expensive game of intimidation, one that's starting to turn the public tide against her.
If he just lets it go and he doesn't penalize the lively parties at all for anything that's gone down, it's going to set a wild precedent in the Second Circuit about how you can maneuver in the court system to obtain evidence in these various shady ways. Oh yeah, just file a lawsuit. You don't have to name anybody. You don't have to notify anybody, and then you'll get whatever.
Blake Lively's latest move: label anyone who challenges her narrative as a paid operative. First, she called her former legal opponent's attorney a PR agent to try and strip away privilege. Now she's going after Perez Hilton with the same tactic, claiming he's not a journalist at all, just a social media influencer secretly pulling strings for Wayfair. The logic? Because he didn't reach out to her team for comment, he must be biased. But here's the problem. In the world of public court filings, no one needs Blake's permission to talk. Court records are public, and journalists, especially independent ones, are under no obligation to call up a celebrity's publicist before reporting. It's a flimsy argument that tries to blur the line between media and marketing, all to discredit anyone who doesn't serve her version of the truth. And in doing so, Blake is revealing more than she realizes. She's showing us how she sees the media, not as observers but as tools to be controlled. The more she tries to strip credibility from creators, the more obvious it becomes that she's not fighting for justice. She's fighting to silence the internet.
The social pressures were there, but I never felt like I belonged, which is something that I still struggle with. And I think has become one of the greatest blessings in disguise. Like I felt like an outsider. Like I would walk into a party and I would want to fit in.
Blake Lively's legal team is now arguing that Perez Hilton isn't a real journalist, just a content creator chasing clicks. Why? Because if they can label him as an influencer, they might bypass legal protections like shield laws that protect reporters from revealing sources or handing over unpublished materials. But this move exposes a deep hypocrisy. Blake herself spent weeks working behind the scenes with legacy outlets like the New York Times, planting carefully worded stories about her case. And when critics pushed back, she didn't exactly invite dialogue. Now she's outraged that someone else, someone outside her control, is doing the same thing from the other side. Perez isn't accused of lying. He's being targeted because his tone is irreverent, his nicknames are biting, and his reach is massive. But here's the truth. Covering court documents and discussing lawsuits is journalism, whether it comes from a Pulitzer winner or a YouTuber with a camera and a mic. Shield laws exist for a reason, to protect public discourse from being crushed by powerful figures. And the more Blake argues that only certain people get to speak, the more she sounds like someone with something to hide. Blake Lively's new fallback argument is as flimsy as it is familiar. If she can't find the evidence, it must have been deleted. Her legal filings now suggest that Wayfair and content creators like Perez Hilton might have destroyed or lost critical communications, not because there's proof, but because she still can't prove her original claim. The smoking gun? The use of apps like Signal, which allow encrypted messages to disappear after a set time. But using Signal doesn't mean a cover-up. It means privacy. It's what journalists, activists, even celebrities use to protect themselves from hacking or leaks, And it's not illegal, nor is it suspicious, unless there's a legal obligation to preserve those messages, which there wasn't at the time. Blake's team wants the court to believe that because messages no longer exist, someone must have been hiding something. But that argument crumbles under scrutiny. Not having evidence isn't the same as destroying it. And if you build your entire case on missing messages that never existed in the first place, it's not a lawsuit, it's a strategy to save face. The real question is, how much longer can she drag this out before the courts and the public call her bluff? With her discovery efforts stalling and her smear campaign claims unraveling, Blake Lively is setting the stage for her next pivot. If you can't find the proof, blame everyone else for hiding it. Her filings are now dripping with accusations of spoliation, the legal term for destroying evidence, a serious claim with zero hard proof. She argues that Wayfair and creators like Perez must have wiped messages, lost files, or purposely withheld communication, all to sabotage her case. But here's the twist. Blake herself has already been accused of encouraging others, including major celebrities, to delete their texts. And when Wayfair said they had no such communications to produce, Blake didn't accept that answer. Instead, she reframed "we don't have it" as "they're refusing to hand it over." It's a classic misdirection tactic. She's building a legal cushion for herself, a narrative that says, "I would have won if they didn't hide the evidence." But in reality, it's a smokescreen. No paper trail doesn't mean it was burned. Sometimes there was never a trail to begin with. And that inconvenient truth is what's quietly tearing her argument apart. As Blake Lively's legal campaign grows weaker, her strategy is becoming crystal clear. When the case collapses, spin the narrative. She's already laying the groundwork by claiming she's been denied justice. Not because her claims lacked merit, but because the alleged evidence was hidden, deleted, or unfairly shielded by legal privilege. It's a masterclass in damage control disguised as a court filing. But here's the catch. Courts aren't swayed by vibes. They require facts, not emotional footnotes. And while Blake's team clings to theories about lost messages and influencer conspiracies, the actual filings keep coming up short. No contracts, no smoking guns, no paper trail that links Perez Hilton or Wayfair to a coordinated smear campaign. Just speculation. What's left is a celebrity who's spent months trying to turn legal pressure into silence, and now risks becoming the face of what happens when fame meets unchecked control. The audience is catching on, the judges are losing patience, and the story once hers to shape is slipping away. If this is Blake's final act in court, it won't end with vindication, just with more questions about why she fought so hard to bury a narrative no one could prove in the first place.